Before we continue, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching this video from. I'd love to know. The crisp mountain air of Aspen, Colorado carried with it the promise of change as Megan and Lily Matthews stepped out onto their front porch. The 18-year-old twins inhaled deeply, their matching auburn hair catching the early morning sunlight. To the casual observer, they were mirror images of each other, but those who knew them well could spot the subtle differences. Megan's freckles scattered like constellations across her nose, Lily's eyes a shade darker, hinting at hidden depths. Their small town nestled in the heart of the Rockies had always been their sanctuary, a place where time seemed to move at its own leisurely pace. But as they stood there, shoulder to shoulder, neither sister could shake the feeling that their world was about to shift irrevocably. "Race you to the lake?" Lily challenged, a mischievous glint in her eye. Megan grinned, her competitive spirit igniting. "You're on!" As they took off down the well-worn path, their laughter echoed through the pine trees. For a moment they were children again, carefree and unburdened by the complexities of adulthood that loomed on the horizon. The lake came into view, its surface a mirror reflecting the cloudless sky above. Breathless and flushed, the sisters collapsed onto the shore, their fingers intertwining as they lay side by side. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" Megan mused, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "Beyond Aspen, I mean." Lily turned to look at her sister, sensing the unspoken yearning in her voice. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember everything we have here, our family, our friends, our whole life. It's hard to imagine leaving it all behind." Megan nodded, but the spark of wanderlust in her eyes didn't dim. Little did they know, their lives were already on the brink of a transformation that would test the very foundations of their sisterhood. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the lake, the sisters made their way back home. The day stretched before them, filled with the mundane tasks of small-town life, helping at their parents' bookstore, meeting friends for coffee at the local cafe, and dreaming of futures yet to be written. It was during one of these ordinary afternoons that Ryan Hawthorne walked into their lives. With his tousled dark hair and easy smile, he seemed to bring a slice of the outside world into their quaint bookstore. Both Megan and Lily found their gazes drawn to him as he browsed the shelves, his fingers trailing along the spines of well-loved novels. "Can I help you find anything?" Megan offered, her heart racing as Ryan turned those piercing blue eyes on her. "Just browsing," he replied with a grin that made her knees weak. "I'm new in town. Thought I'd get a feel for the local culture." Lily, watching from behind the counter, felt an inexplicable pang of jealousy as she observed the easy rapport developing between Ryan and her sister. She pushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to protectiveness. As the weeks passed, Ryan became a fixture in their lives. He regaled them with stories of his travels, painting vivid pictures of bustling cities and exotic locales that made their small town seem even smaller by comparison. Megan found herself drawn to his adventurous spirit, while Lily was captivated by his quiet moments of introspection. Neither sister realized that they were both falling for the same man, their shared secret threatening to unravel the tight-knit fabric of their relationship. It was Megan who first noticed the changes in her body, the subtle swelling of her breasts, the waves of nausea that hit her in the mornings. At first, she dismissed it as stress or perhaps a lingering flu. But as the days turned into weeks, a gnawing suspicion took root in her mind. With trembling hands, she purchased a pregnancy test from the drugstore 2 towns over, unwilling to risk the gossip that would inevitably spread if anyone in Aspen saw her. In the privacy of her bathroom, time seemed to stretch into eternity as she waited for the results. 2 pink lines, clear and undeniable. Megan sank to the cold tile floor, her mind reeling. How could this happen? They had been careful, hadn't they? Tears welled up in her eyes as the full weight of her situation settled on her shoulders. She was 18, barely out of high school, with dreams of college and travel that now seemed to be slipping through her fingers like sand. As she sat there, hugging her knees to her chest, Megan's thoughts turned to Ryan. How would he react? Would he stand by her, or would this send him running for the hills? And then there was Lily, her confidant, her other half. How could she possibly keep this from her? Little did Megan know that across the hall, Lily was grappling with her own earth-shattering revelation. The same symptoms, the same fears, the same life-altering test results. Two sisters, bound by blood, and now by a secret that threatened to tear them apart. The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions for both Megan and Lily. They moved through their routines like sleepwalkers, each carrying the weight of their secret while trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. Their parents, John and Sarah Matthews, noticed the change in their daughters, but attributed it to the usual tumult of young adulthood. It was Ryan who first learned of their shared predicament. Megan, unable to bear the burden alone any longer, confided in him during a moonlit walk by the lake. His reaction was a mixture of shock and concern, his brow furrowing as he processed the news. "We'll figure this out together," he promised, pulling her close. But even as the words left his lips, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Unbeknownst to Megan, Lily had a similar conversation with Ryan just days later. The web of deceit grew more tangled as Ryan, caught between the two sisters, pleaded with each to keep their pregnancy a secret for the time being. "I just need some time to sort things out," he explained, his charm masking the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. As autumn painted the mountains in hues of gold and crimson, the sisters found themselves drifting apart, each lost in their own thoughts and fears. The once inseparable pair now moved like strangers in their own home, their shared silences heavy with unspoken truths. It was during a crisp October evening that the first cracks in their carefully constructed facades began to show. John Matthews, returning home early from a business trip, overheard Megan's hushed phone conversation with her best friend, Emma. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this a secret, Em," Megan whispered, unaware of her father's presence just outside her door. "I'm scared. What if I'm not ready to be a mother?" John's world tilted on its axis as the implications of his daughter's words sank in. His little girl, pregnant. The very thought sent a surge of emotions through him. Anger, disappointment, fear for her future. Unable to contain himself, John burst into Megan's room, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "Are you pregnant?" Megan's phone clattered to the floor as she stared at her father in horror. The secret she had guarded so carefully was now out in the open, and she felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice. "Dad, she began, but the words caught in her throat. "Who's the father?" John pressed, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Is it that new boy in town? Ryan?" Megan's silence was all the confirmation he needed. John's face darkened as he paced the small confines of her bedroom. "This is unacceptable, Megan. Do you have any idea what this will do to our family's reputation? To your future?" Tears streamed down Megan's face as she listened to her father's tirade. She wanted to explain, to make him understand that she was just as scared and confused as he was, but the words wouldn't come. "We'll figure this out," John finally said, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. "But for now, not a word of this to anyone else. Understood? Especially not to your sister." As John left the room, slamming the door behind him, Megan curled up on her bed, her body racked with silent sobs. Across the hall, Lily pressed her ear to her own door, her heart racing as she pieced together fragments of the argument she had overheard. The once unshakable bond between the sisters was now stretched to its breaking point, strained by the weight of secrets and the looming specter of an uncertain future. Chapter 2. The Weight of Silence. The following weeks passed in a haze of tension and unspoken truths. Megan, burdened by her father's disappointment and her own fears, withdrew into herself. She threw herself into her work at the bookstore, finding solace in the familiar smell of paper and ink. Lily, on the other hand, clung to her dreams of a future with Ryan. She spent hours planning and daydreaming, imagining a life filled with love and laughter. In her mind, their child would be the beginning of a beautiful journey, not the end of her ambitions. But as her body changed, Lily found it increasingly difficult to hide her condition from her family. She took to wearing loose-fitting clothes and avoiding prolonged conversations with her parents. The once open relationship she had shared with her mother, Sarah, became strained as Lily dodged questions about her health and future plans. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves carpeted the ground outside, Megan found herself alone in the bookstore. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see Emma, her best friend since childhood, standing in the doorway. "Meg," Emma said softly, concern etched on her face. "How are you holding up?" Megan's carefully constructed facade crumbled at the gentle inquiry. Before she knew it, she was enveloped in Emma's embrace, tears flowing freely. "I don't know what to do, Em," Megan confessed, her voice muffled against her friend's shoulder. "Dad's furious, Ryan's been distant, and Lily, I can't even look her in the eye anymore. How did everything get so messed up?" Emma stroked Megan's hair, offering what comfort she could. "Have you thought about telling Lily? She's your sister, Meg. If anyone would understand, it's her." Megan pulled away, wiping her eyes. "I can't. You don't understand. It would destroy her." Little did Megan know that at that very moment, Lily was grappling with her own inner turmoil. She had noticed the changes in her sister, the pallor of her skin, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she seemed to retreat into herself. A part of Lily longed to reach out, to bridge the growing chasm between them, but her own secret held her back. As the days grew shorter and the air turned crisp with the promise of winter, the tension in the Matthews household reached a fever pitch. John, still reeling from the discovery of Megan's pregnancy, became increasingly stern and withdrawn. Sarah, sensing the undercurrents of discord but unaware of its source, tried in vain to bring her family back together. It was during one of these strained family dinners that the carefully constructed walls of secrecy finally came tumbling down. The only sounds in the dining room were the clink of silverware against plates and the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Megan, unable to bear the silence any longer, took a deep breath. "I have something to tell you all," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. All eyes turned to her, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. John's fork clattered to his plate, his expression a mask of resignation. I'm pregnant," Megan said, the words hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, to everyone's shock, Lily's chair scraped back as she stood abruptly. "So am I," she announced, her voice trembling, but determined. The room erupted into chaos. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief. John's face turned an alarming shade of red as he struggled to process this new information. But it was the expressions on Megan and Lily's faces that truly told the story, a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning horror as the full implications of their shared secret came to light. How is this possible?" Sarah finally managed to ask, looking from one daughter to the other. Megan and Lily's eyes met across the table, a lifetime of shared experiences and unspoken understanding passing between them in an instant. In that moment, they both knew. There was only one possible explanation. "Ryan," they said in unison, their voices barely audible. The name hung in the air like a curse, shattering the last vestiges of normalcy in their once idyllic family life. John pushed back from the table, his chair toppling over with a crash that made everyone flinch. "I'll kill him," he growled, storming towards the door. "Dad, no!" Megan cried, while Lily stood frozen, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her still flat stomach. Sarah, her motherly instincts kicking in despite her shock, moved to intercept her husband. "John, stop! This isn't helping anyone." As their parents grappled with the situation, Megan and Lily remained at the table, unable to look at each other. The bond that had once seemed unbreakable now lay in shards around them, as sharp and painful as broken glass. "How could you?" Lily finally whispered, her voice thick with hurt and betrayal. "You knew how I felt about him." Megan's head snapped up, her own anger flaring. "Me? What about you? You've been sneaking around with Ryan behind my back." The accusations flew back and forth, years of unspoken rivalry and resentment bubbling to the surface. Their raised voices mingled with the sounds of their parents' argument, creating a cacophony of pain and confusion that seemed to shake the very foundations of their home. It was Sarah who finally managed to restore some semblance of order. "Enough," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "All of you, sit down. Now." Chastened, the family returned to the table. John's face was ashen, his earlier rage replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Megan and Lily sat as far apart as the table would allow, refusing to meet each other's eyes. "We need to talk about this calmly," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the turmoil evident in her eyes. "Megan, Lily, I want you both to tell me everything from the beginning." And so, haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency, the sisters began to unravel the tangled web of their relationships with Ryan. They spoke of stolen moments, of promises whispered under starlit skies, of dreams and fears shared in the quiet hours of the night. As they talked, the full extent of Ryan's deception became clear. He had played them both, weaving a separate narrative for each sister, always with an excuse for why their relationship needed to remain a secret. "I'm going to be sick," Lily murmured, pushing away from the table and fleeing to the bathroom. Megan watched her go, a mix of emotions churning in her gut. Part of her wanted to follow, to comfort her sister as she had done countless times before. But the hurt was still too raw, the betrayal too fresh. John, who had remained silent throughout their confessions, finally spoke. "This Ryan, he needs to take responsibility." "Megan," he said, turning to his eldest daughter, "you'll marry him. It's the only way to salvage this situation." "What?" Megan gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad, you can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious," John replied, his tone brooking no argument. "This is about more than just you now. It's about our family's reputation, about providing for that child you're carrying." Sarah placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "John, maybe we should take some time to think this through. It's been a shock for all of us." But John shook his head, his mind made up. "No, Sarah. This is how it has to be. Megan will marry Ryan, and that's final." As the argument continued around her, Megan felt as though she were drowning. The future she had imagined for herself, college, travel, a career, seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a life she had never wanted. In the bathroom, Lily leaned against the cool porcelain of the sink, her reflection in the mirror a pale ghost of her former self. The echoes of the heated discussion downstairs reverberated through the floorboards, each word a dagger to her heart. She placed a trembling hand on her still flat stomach, the reality of her situation crashing over her in waves. How had they come to this? Just weeks ago, she and Megan had been inseparable, sharing dreams and secrets as they always had. Now it felt as though an insurmountable chasm had opened between them, filled with hurt, betrayal, and the shattered remains of their trust. A soft knock on the door startled Lily from her reverie. "Lily?" It was her mother's voice, gentle, but tinged with worry. "Sweetheart, can I come in?" Lily hesitated for a moment before reaching out to unlock the door. Sarah entered, her face a mask of concern and love. Without a word, she enveloped her youngest daughter in a tight embrace. "Oh, my darling," Sarah murmured, stroking Lily's hair as she had done when she was a little girl. "I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong." Lily broke down then, her body shaking with silent sobs as she clung to her mother. All the fear, anger, and confusion she had been holding back for weeks came pouring out in a torrent of tears. "What am I going to do, Mom?" Lily whispered between ragged breaths. "Everything's ruined. Megan hates me. Dad's furious, and Ryan... I don't even know who Ryan really is anymore." Sarah pulled back slightly, cupping Lily's face in her hands. "Listen to me, Lily Matthews. Nothing is ruined. Yes, this situation is complicated and painful, but you are stronger than you know. We will get through this as a family." As Sarah's words sank in, Lily felt a small flicker of hope ignite in her chest. She wasn't alone in this, no matter how isolating it felt. Downstairs, the argument had reached a fever pitch. Megan's voice, shrill with desperation, carried up the stairs. "I won't do it, Dad. You can't force me to marry someone I don't even know if I love anymore." John's response was muffled, but the anger in his tone was unmistakable. Lily and Sarah exchanged a worried glance before making their way back to the dining room. The scene that greeted them was one of barely contained chaos. John stood at the head of the table, his face flushed with anger. Megan had retreated to the far corner of the room, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. The air crackled with tension, years of unspoken resentments and fears laid bare in the harsh light of their new reality. "That's enough," Sarah said firmly, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom around her. "We're all upset and overwhelmed, but tearing each other apart isn't going to solve anything." John opened his mouth to argue, but Sarah silenced him with a look. "No, John, you've said your piece. Now it's time to listen." She turned to her daughters, her heart breaking at the sight of their tear-stained faces and hunched shoulders. These were her little girls, the ones she had nursed through fevers, comforted after nightmares, and cheered on at every milestone. Now they stood on the precipice of adulthood, facing a challenge that would test them in ways she could never have imagined. "Megan, Lily," Sarah began, her voice soft but firm. "What's done is done. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward. Your father and I," she cast a pointed look at John, "will support you no matter what you decide. But these decisions need to be yours." Megan and Lily exchanged a wary glance, the first time they had truly looked at each other since their secrets had been revealed. In that moment, something shifted between them. The hurt was still there, raw and aching, but underneath it was a glimmer of the bond they had always shared. "What about Ryan?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The name hung in the air like a dark cloud, a reminder of the betrayal that had brought them to this point. "He needs to be told," Sarah said gently. "But that can wait until tomorrow. For now, I think we all need some time to process and rest." As the family dispersed, each retreating to their own corners to grapple with the evening's revelations, Megan found herself lingering in the kitchen. The familiar space, filled with memories of happier times, felt alien now. She was about to head upstairs when Lily appeared in the doorway. For a long moment, the sisters stared at each other, a lifetime of shared experiences hanging in the balance between them. "I'm sorry," they both blurted out simultaneously, then paused, startled by the synchronicity that had once been so natural between them. A ghost of a smile flickered across Lily's face. "I guess some things never change," she murmured. Megan nodded, feeling the iron bands around her heart loosen slightly. "Lil, I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know about you and Ryan. If I had—" "I know," Lily interrupted softly. "I didn't know about you two either. God, what a mess we're in." The sisters lapsed into silence, the weight of their shared predicament settling over them like a heavy blanket. But as they stood there in the quiet of the kitchen, something subtle began to shift. The anger and betrayal that had consumed them earlier started to give way to a tentative understanding. "What are we going to do?" Megan asked, voicing the question that had been haunting them both. Lily shook her head, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her stomach. "I don't know, but maybe we can figure it out together." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the trust too badly damaged. But it was a start. A tiny seedling of hope pushing through the wreckage of their shattered world. As they made their way upstairs, each to their own room to face a sleepless night, filled with worry and uncertainty, Megan and Lily knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. They would have to confront Ryan, navigate the choppy waters of their family's expectations, and make decisions that would shape the rest of their lives. But for the first time since their secrets had come to light, they didn't feel entirely alone. The bond between them, tested and strained to its limits, had bent but not broken. In the face of an uncertain future, it was a small comfort, but a powerful one nonetheless. As the night deepened and the house settled into an uneasy quiet, the Matthews family each grappled with their own thoughts and fears. John paced in his study, torn between anger at the situation and fear for his daughter's futures. Sarah sat in the living room, flipping through old photo albums, her heart aching for the carefree girls smiling up at her from the pages. And in their separate rooms, Megan and Lily lay awake, hands resting on their stomachs, wondering about the tiny lives growing within them and the challenges that lay ahead. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the mountains, casting long shadows across the sleeping town of Aspen, they each made a silent vow. Whatever came next, they would face it head-on, with the strength and resilience that had always defined them. The stage was set for a new chapter in their lives, one that would test the bonds of family, love, and sisterhood in ways they could never have imagined. Chapter 3. Confrontations and Choices. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the autumn sun casting a golden glow over the town of Aspen. But within the Matthews household, the atmosphere remained heavy with unspoken tensions and looming decisions. Megan was the first to venture downstairs, drawn by the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. She found her mother in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her eyes distant and troubled. "Morning, Mom," Megan said softly, her voice still rough with sleep and unshed tears. Sarah looked up, a wan smile touching her lips. "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" It was a loaded question, one that Megan wasn't sure how to answer. How was she feeling? Terrified, angry, confused, heartbroken. All of these and more swirled within her like a tempest. "I'm okay," she finally managed, reaching for the coffee pot. "Is Dad up yet?" Sarah shook her head. "He left early for work. I think he needed some time to process everything." Megan nodded, a mixture of relief and disappointment washing over her. Part of her had hoped to speak with her father, to make him understand that forcing her into marriage wasn't the answer. But another part was grateful for the reprieve, for a few more hours to gather her thoughts before facing his disappointment again. As she sipped her coffee, Lily appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. The sisters' eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. So much had changed in the span of a single evening, yet the instinctive understanding they had always shared remained. "We need to talk to Ryan," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Megan nodded, her grip tightening on her mug. "I know, I called him last night after everyone went to bed. He's coming over this morning." Sarah looked between her daughters, concern etched on her face. "Do you want me to be here when he arrives?" Megan and Lily exchanged a glance, years of shared experiences allowing them to reach a decision without words. "No, Mom," Megan said gently. "We need to do this ourselves." Sarah nodded, understanding and pride mingling in her eyes. "All right, but I'm just a phone call away if you need me." As Sarah left for work, the sisters found themselves alone in the kitchen, the ticking of the old clock on the wall marking the passage of time until Ryan's arrival. "What are we going to say to him?" Lily asked, her voice small and uncertain. Megan shook her head, a mirthless laugh escaping her. "I have no idea. Congratulations, you're going to be a father, twice?" The absurdity of the situation hit them then, and for a moment they were transported back to simpler times. Times when they would stay up late, giggling over shared jokes and dreams of the future. The laughter that bubbled up was tinged with hysteria, but it was cathartic nonetheless. As their laughter subsided, Megan reached out and took Lily's hand. "Whatever happens, Lil, we're in this together, okay?" Lily squeezed back, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Together," she agreed. The sound of a car pulling up outside broke the moment. Megan and Lily tensed, their momentary levity evaporating as they steeled themselves for the confrontation to come. Ryan's knock on the door seemed to echo through the house. Megan moved to answer it, Lily close behind her. As she opened the door, they came face to face with the man who had turned their world upside down. Ryan stood on the porch, his usual easy charm replaced by an air of nervousness. His eyes darted between the sisters, widening as he took in their serious expressions. "Megan, Lily," he said, his voice strained. "What's going on?" Your message sounded urgent. Megan stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. "We need to talk, Ryan. All of us." As they settled in the living room, an uncomfortable silence descended. Ryan perched on the edge of the armchair while Megan and Lily sat side by side on the couch, presenting a united front. So, Ryan began, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. What's this all about? Megan and Lily exchanged a look, years of sisterly communication, allowing them to decide without words who would speak first. Ryan, Megan said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. I'm pregnant. The color drained from Ryan's face, his eyes widening in shock. But before he could respond, Lily spoke up. So am I, she said quietly. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock and Ryan's ragged breathing as the full implications of their words sank in. What? How? Both of you? Ryan stammered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before their eyes. Don't play dumb, Ryan, Megan snapped, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. You've been stringing us both along for months. Did you think we wouldn't find out? Ryan's shock gave way to desperation. I never meant for this to happen, he pleaded. I cared about both of you. I couldn't choose. Couldn't choose? Lily's voice was sharp with disbelief. We're not items on a menu, Ryan. We're people, sisters. And now... Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. The gravity of the situation seemed to finally hit Ryan. He slumped in his chair, running a hand through his hair. What do you want me to do? He asked weakly. Megan and Lily looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. In that moment, they realized that despite everything, their bond as sisters was stronger than any betrayal. We want the truth, Megan said firmly. All of it. No more lies, no more games. And so, over the next hour, Ryan laid bare the full extent of his deception. He spoke of how he had been drawn to both sisters from the moment he arrived in Aspen, unable to choose between Megan's adventurous spirit and Lily's quiet strength. He admitted to crafting separate narratives for each of them, always with an excuse for why their relationship needed to remain a secret. As Ryan talked, Megan and Lily listened in stunned silence. The Ryan they had each fallen for, the charming, sincere man who had promised them the world, was revealed to be a carefully constructed illusion. When Ryan finally fell silent, the sisters sat processing everything they had heard. The hurt and betrayal they felt was palpable, filling the room like a thick fog. I'm so sorry, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for any of this to happen. I'll do whatever you want. If you want me to marry one of you or... No, Megan and Lily said in unison, their voices firm. Ryan looked up, startled by their synchronized response. We don't want you to marry either of us, Megan continued, her voice steady despite the emotion roiling within her. Lily nodded in agreement. What we want is for you to take responsibility for your actions. These children, our children, deserve better than a father who sees them as an obligation. Ryan's relief at not being forced into marriage was quickly replaced by a dawning realization of the magnitude of his actions. Of course, he said quickly. I'll help in any way I can, financially or... We'll work out the details later, Megan cut him off. For now, I think you should leave. We need time to process all of this. As Ryan stood to go, he paused at the door, turning back to face the sisters. I truly am sorry, he said softly. I know it doesn't change anything, but I never meant to hurt either of you. After Ryan left, Megan and Lily sat in silence, the weight of everything that had transpired settling over them like a heavy blanket. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and daunting. What do we do now? Lily asked, her voice small and tired. Megan reached out and took her sister's hand. I don't know, she admitted, but whatever it is, we do it together. As they sat there, hands clasped tightly, the sisters felt a subtle shift in their relationship. The hurt and betrayal were still there, raw and painful, but underneath was a renewed sense of the bond they had always shared. In the face of an uncertain future, they had each other, and for now, that would have to be enough. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. John, still struggling to come to terms with the situation, threw himself into work, staying late at the office and speaking little when he was home. Sarah became a pillar of strength for her daughters, offering support and guidance as they navigated the choppy waters of their new reality. Megan and Lily, drawn closer by their shared experience, began to tentatively plan for the future. They researched prenatal care, discussed their options for continuing their education, and grappled with the monumental task of becoming mothers at such a young age. As autumn deepened into winter, the town of Aspen transformed into a winter wonderland. Snow blanketed the mountains, and holiday lights twinkled in the windows of shops and homes. But for the Matthews family, the usual joy of the season was tempered by the weight of their circumstances. Megan and Lily, now in their second trimester, found their bodies changing rapidly. The physical manifestation of their pregnancies made their situation impossible to ignore, and soon, whispers began to circulate through the small town. Sympathetic glances and not-so-subtle stares followed the sisters wherever they went. One snowy evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, John cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy silence that had become all too common. "Girls," he began, his voice gruff with emotion, "I owe you both an apology." Megan and Lily exchanged surprised glances. Their father, never one for emotional displays, looked uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I was wrong to try and force a solution on you," John continued. "I was scared for you, for our family. But I realize now that you're both stronger and wiser than I gave you credit for." Sarah reached out and squeezed her husband's hand, tears shimmering in her eyes. "We're proud of you," she added softly. "The way you've handled this situation, the maturity you've shown, you've both grown up so much." The tension that had been simmering in the household for months seemed to dissipate, replaced by a tentative warmth. As they cleared the table together, a family united once more, Megan and Lily felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. As winter gave way to spring, new life began to stir in Aspen. The first crocuses poked through the melting snow, a symbol of resilience and renewal that resonated deeply with the Matthews sisters. Megan and Lily, their bellies now round and prominent, had settled into a rhythm. They attended prenatal classes together, pored over baby name books, and transformed their childhood bedrooms into cozy nurseries. The bond between them, tested but unbroken, had grown stronger than ever. Ryan, true to his word, had stepped up to provide financial support. He remained on the periphery of their lives, a constant reminder of the complexity of their situation. But the sisters had found a way to move forward, focusing on the joy of impending motherhood rather than the circumstances that had brought them to this point. As Megan's due date approached, the entire Matthews family rallied around her. Sarah took time off work to help prepare, while John surprised everyone by throwing himself into assembling cribs and stocking up on diapers. It was a warm June evening when Megan's water broke. The hospital waiting room became a hub of nervous energy as the family awaited news. Hours passed, filled with pacing, whispered prayers, and the occasional nervous laughter. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a tired but radiant Megan welcomed her daughter into the world. As Lily held her newborn niece, tears streaming down her face, she felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. "She's perfect, Meg," Lily whispered, gently rocking the tiny bundle. Megan smiled tiredly from the hospital bed. "She is, isn't she? I was thinking of naming her Hope." "Hope," Lily repeated, tasting the word. "It's perfect." 2 weeks later, it was Lily's turn. The delivery was long and difficult, but with Megan by her side, offering encouragement and support, Lily persevered. As the first cry of her son filled the delivery room, Lily felt a profound shift in her world. "Meet your cousin, Hope," Megan said softly, holding her daughter close to Lily's newborn son. "What's his name, Lil?" Lily gazed at her son, marveling at his tiny features. "Ethan," she said with certainty. "It means strong." As the sisters held their children, marveling at the miracle of new life, they knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be sleepless nights, financial struggles, and the challenge of balancing motherhood with their own dreams and aspirations. But they also knew that they had each other and the unwavering support of their parents. The journey that had begun in secrecy and pain had led them to this moment of pure joy and love. In the years that followed, Megan and Lily would often look back on that tumultuous time with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. The circumstances that had threatened to tear them apart had ultimately brought them closer together, forging a bond that was unbreakable. Hope and Ethan grew into curious, adventurous children, their bond mirroring that of their mothers. The Matthews family, once fractured by secrets and misunderstandings, had been rebuilt stronger than ever. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was still, Megan and Lily would sit together, marveling at the twists and turns that had brought them to this point. They had faced their greatest challenge and emerged not just intact, but triumphant. Their story, born of heartache and betrayal, had blossomed into one of love, resilience, and the enduring power of sisterhood. In the end, it was not the circumstances of their children's conception that defined them, but the love and strength with which they faced each new day. As they looked to the future, Megan and Lily knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For in each other, they had found not just a sister, but a best friend, a co-parent, and a partner in the grand adventure of life. And so, in the small town of Aspen, nestled in the heart of the Colorado Rockies, two sisters and their children carved out a life filled with love, laughter, and the unshakable certainty that family, in all its complex, messy, beautiful forms, was the greatest gift of all.